Okay, welcome everyone. It's 7 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jane Lamason, and I'm a Master Gardener in Napa County. And we bring you our library talks the first Thursday of every month in partnership with the Napa County Library, who hosts the program for us. We thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll continue to join us the first Thursday of every month. We'll be turning it over to Stephanie in just a minute. Just a reminder, as you enter the room, please mute yourselves and turn off your video. And then we'll get going. Okay, Stephanie, take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. With increased drought conditions and water restrictions, many homeowners are choosing to let their lawns die. But what do you do next? The New American Front Yard, Kiss Your Grass Goodbye by Sarah Carolyn Sutton is the complete guide for creating a beautiful, eco-friendly, water-wise, low-maintenance front yard. This book is designed to provide the reader the inspiration to design the beautiful, eco-friendly front yard. The author shows the reader how to create a base plan drawn to scale on grid paper, which will then become the foundation for defining your vision. Then you'll create your own design, select your plants. It'll show you how to accessorize your yard, and finally, how to go about installing your design. Sutton's book is full of useful advice and practical solutions that the average homeowner can implement for any garden. If you are ready to make a landscaping change, this book is a valuable resource to consider as you develop your plan to change your front yard. If you're considering re-landscaping using succulents, then Designing with Succulents by Deborah Lee Baldwin is a book that should be in your reference library. This book contains a wealth of information on design and cultivation basics, along with hundreds of plant recommendations. The photos are gorgeous, and they really get your imagination charged up to include succulents in your design. Once you've decided on which succulents to consider, what do you do next? Well, I was really interested to read a chapter called The Top 50 Water-Wise Companion Plants for Succulents. Not only did it name numerous ornamental plants that would perform well living side by side with the succulents, but there were some beautiful images featured so you can see what the results would be, and so you can kind of get a sense what it would look like in your own garden. This is definitely another book to have on your resource shelf as you explore the gardening possibilities of using low water succulents and perennials. And both The New American Front Yard, Kiss Your Grass Goodbye by Sarah Carolyn Sutton and Designing with Succulents by Deborah Lee Baldwin are available for checkout at your Napa County Library branch. And I'll also type the titles in the chat box for you so you can refer back to them. Thanks, Jane. I'm looking forward to the program. What happened?
She's muted. Front row.
I forgot to unmute.
Oh, I was wondering there.
Thank you, Stephanie. What I said is that Deborah Lee Baldwin book is really a great book, and it's a good coffee table book too, because you want to look through it over and over again. We'll get to our topic from thirsty lawn to low water succulents and perennials, a step-by-step guide. And our speaker this evening is Tonya Mihalis, but I have a few housekeeping items to do. So next slide, Steph. Okay, so who are we? We're the UC Master Gardeners of Napa County. And as we share each month, our mission is to educate the public. We are trained on research-based knowledge, and our goal is to bring that public education to our communities. And what we are aiming to touch on are things that would be for the home horticulturalist, your home gardener, pest management, sustainable landscapes, water conservation. Those are the areas we want to hit. Next slide, please. And so we do send a survey to our participants, and this comes out from the UC. And the goal is to determine if our programs are hitting the mark. Are we helping you make decisions and changes in the garden? For example, have you started to use compost more? Are you reducing your use of fertilizers because you're using compost? Those are the kind of things that we want to find out and to ensure that we are helping you make the decisions for your garden. So if you don't want to receive this survey for some reason, please put your name in the chat now, and we will remove your name from that survey. We do hope you'll take the time to take the survey, though, because it is helpful for us. Okay, we're ready to begin. And I'm going to turn it over to our Master Gardener, Tanya Mihalis, but we call her Tony too. Okay, thank you.
Hello and welcome. I'm going to share my lawn removal journey with you. So my hope is to inspire you to start your own garden with confidence. So I'll break down the lawn conversion process into steps you can follow to work towards achieving your climate-friendly, Napa area appropriate garden that brings you joy. So about my title, Succulents and Perennials. All my succulents are perennials. So what is a perennial and why do we want them? Perennials are flowering plants that live longer than 2 seasons. So some are evergreen, others die back at the end of the flowering season and then regrow from the same roots the following year. Perennials are dependable and relatively easy. So they're available in a huge variety of colors, textures, forms, and fragrances. For many, fall is the perfect time to plant them to take advantage of warm autumn soil and winter rain. So, first, I know, what's your beef with lawns? It seems like master gardeners are constantly picking on lawns, but there is a plethora of good reasons we encourage you to consider replacing them with less thirsty alternatives. So, with water conservation in mind, there is a need, right, for water-wise, drought-tolerant landscaping in Napa Valley as California experiences more extreme weather. So, from fire-wise to low water use, Napa Valley gardeners are being called upon to think about our landscaping in new ways, to change our perspectives of what is a nice landscape and even our definitions of beauty. So, turf sod is simply not appropriate for our climate. Trying to recreate its tropical environment in our arid summers is not feasible. Working against nature can be a real pain in the grass. So I considered a fake lawn. Boo, hiss. No. But after a lot of research, I discovered that they are a significant contributor to climate change and our water scarcity problem. So fake lawns don't do any of the work of living plants, like providing oxygen, feeding the soil, consuming carbon dioxide, and cooling our planet. So if anyone's still not convinced or looking for inspiration on lawn-like alternatives, I highly recommend you check out last October 2023's library talk called Lawnlessness. There's a lot of good information in there. So you might say, well, if reducing water is so important, why not just forego landscaping altogether? But plants have invaluable benefits to humans. They provide our food, our oxygen, they consume the carbon dioxide we release into the air. They purify water, they perform erosion and flood control, carbon storage, climate regulation. Plants are mini AC units. So they support pollinators, they feed our soil microorganisms through decomposition. They benefit our mental health and provide recreational benefits. Nobody ever wanted to go for a hike, right? In a desert or not a desert, in a concrete jungle, right? So I believe plants are our friends and they're the answer to climate change. So now we know the why. Let's get to the real reason we're here tonight, the fun stuff, and talk about the how. So I have a lot of information to share with you, but I don't want you to get overwhelmed with the options I present or feel like you must try all of them. But I do hope to push you to your aha moment and inspire you to get going on that yard project you've been putting off. So, we'll talk about ways to get started, how to get your lot plan, the importance of plant research, how to make a garden plan, get outside and stage a garden, evaluating your existing irrigation, preparing for sheet mulching, literally easy peasy step by step sheet mulching guide, getting your new plants in the ground, laying out your drip line, the importance of mulch, and of course, the last thing, admire your hard work. So, when I started my front yard conversion journey, I wasn't yet a master gardener. So I'm going to share with you my experience, including a few epic failures, so you can learn from my mistake. So this is where I started. It's a typical builder grade landscape with a tree in the middle of the lawn and public service. Note the tree stakes are still attached to the tree 8 years after planting. So please, if your tree is still staked, do it a favor and remove them before it's too late. Most trees don't need any staking past 2 years. And also, did you know that broadleaf weed and feed can harm your tree? Those are two important tips I learned as a master gardener. So as you can see from this photo, our lawn did not look good. It was never cared for properly and was mostly weeds by the time we inherited it. So trying to make up for past mistakes was fruitless and frustrating, tedious, and time consuming. So we could never water it enough. All summer, it looked crisp and horrible. We put up with it for several years, but we're just never happy with it. So maybe that's where you are, tired of your lawn, ready to say goodbye, wanting to move forward on your project, but maybe a little stuck in place, feeling overwhelmed by the plant options, or maybe feeling unsure of what to do first or your ability to do it right. So that's where I was, stuck, unhappy, suffering from analysis paralysis. Where do I even start? So I have some ideas to help you get started. So I personally may or may not have done all of these things. Yeah, I did. Some may say there's no problem I cannot overthink. So, I started with a brainstorming exercise. I needed to get all my thoughts on paper so they could stop cluttering up my head. And no, I just made this for this slideshow. This is not my original one. It was not tidy or it was a mess, but that's kind of how the process goes. So just write down everything you're thinking about for your new space in no certain order, and then go back and read through it and highlight or circle the most important things to you. Maybe brainstorming isn't your thing. Maybe you're a list maker. So you can make a list or, both, like I did. You can, some options for you to consider. So, what are your needs or wants? Maybe you need some privacy. I really wanted to feed hummingbirds year round and encourage pollinators. What are your limitations? Maybe you have power lines overhead or utilities underground. Maybe you have HOA restrictions. I'm really sorry about that. Maybe you want to take advantage of cash for grass. So there's certain steps you must follow on a specific timeline to qualify for that. And what about maintenance? Can you do it? Do you have a yard person? Can they do it? Who can? So do you want to gain knowledge and confidence on pruning perennials yourself? Maybe. If so, you can join the Master Gardeners on the last Saturday of this month, October 26th, at Los Flores for a workshop on pruning perennials and putting your garden to bed for the winter and succulent garden cleanup. As there is no putting your succulent garden to bed for the winter, it's just another season for succulents. That's why they're so awesome. Maybe you have problems to solve. I had some flooding. I also had existing plants or trees I wanted to keep. Maybe you want to add hardscaping or reduce noise or something like that. And also, don't forget to consider views from inside your house. Will you block a window if you put in a tall bush in the front? Like, use your windows to frame your view from inside. So make it look nice. Create a vignette. Maybe include some garden art. And then What do you like? What's your garden aesthetic? What draws you to a garden? What do you want to look at in your yard every day? So those are great listings. You can also find inspiration in the real world, IRL. Attend garden tours. The Napa County Resource Conservation District's Climate Friendly Garden Tour is a mouthful, but it's a wonderful opportunity to see Napa Valley gardens. This year's tour was in May on the 18th. So, look at your calendar, put it on there. It's going to be the 10th of May, somewhere in there. Then you could also take photographs of front yards that appeal to you. And this particular one was on the RCD Garden Tour this year. And if you're a succulent lover and you haven't been, I highly recommend a visit to the Ruth Bancroft Garden in Walnut Creek. And you can also look online. You can create Pinterest boards, create a digital mood board to help you decide your garden aesthetic. You can also visit the library. Search books at the library in the home and garden collection. Some suggested topics, like look at hummingbird gardens, firewise gardening, dry garden, pollinator garden, Mediterranean garden, because we do live in a Mediterranean type climate, or just look up succulents. There's a lot there. So at the time I was planning this, I was taking my kids to the library to pick out a new book every 3 weeks. And as they browsed, I would head straight to my favorite stacks, the home and gardening collection. So since I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, I just started at the top of the shelf and worked my way down. I fell in love with the lush English cottage gardens stuffed full of plants and constantly in bloom. I wanted butterflies and hummingbirds to become frequent visitors. And I was so inspired, I bought a few English garden perennials and put them along the foundation of my house in the narrow planting beds created by the builders. I watered often, but I watched them fry in the summer heat despite my efforts. And I learned the hard way that English cottage garden plants don't work for my situation. I also learned that just because the big box stores sell a plant, it doesn't mean it'll grow well in my yard. So I turned to looking at dry gardens, but at the time I'd only come across landscapes with like a handful of cacti and succulents in a flat sea of rocks. And that didn't appeal to me at all. But several months in, I came across, huzzah, Deborah Lee Baldwin's book. So this is the first edition of the book that Stephanie showed us earlier. And it changed everything. That was it. The cover had the lush growth and color I loved about an English cottage garden, but it used varieties of less thirsty succulents and succulent compatibles to get the same look. I was then able to narrow my search, create plant lists, and then make a plan. Because landscaping a yard requires some planning and preparation if you want it to turn out well. Before turf is removed, initial steps include like assessing your current irrigation system and identifying needing modification, finding the plants that will work best in your yard, characterizing your soil, assessing site conditions, microclimates, and lot-specific conditions that affect your plant success. So this is where having a lot plan is very helpful. So I ordered a plan from the city. You can order it from the county's assessor's office for a fee. But I also came across this website. It's the Geographic Information Systems map. There is a link in the chat. It's a free site. You can find it from Napa County and also the city of Napa's webpage. And up here in the left corner, you put in your address in the search box, you hit enter, and there's your lot. You can use that as a guide to help you plan your new garden where your lawn used to be. It has handy dandy tools over here, like measurement tools built right in. And this is this was my lot. This is my front yard. I looked up my address and found I created a lovely smiley face in my yard. Who knew? You can use it to get ballpark figures. So you just click on there and it'll give you the measurement. The measurement from clicking on here was 22.4 feet. I went out and measured it for real. It's 23 feet. So it's really close. Not perfect. You can click the entire area and like close the box, and it'll calculate the area for you. So if you don't want to do any math, that's the way to go. So this is what I received from the city on the left-hand side. It's just an 8.5 piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, regular sheet of paper. And all that information was crammed on there. And I was like, this is so much stuff. So I scanned it into my computer and I just erase all the things that I don't need. So over on the right, after I scanned it in, I just kept a few of the measurements, which I did go out and double check, and they're not exact, but they're pretty close. So now in your in your process, it's a great time for this public service announcement. Call before you dig. It's important to know what is below so you don't plant the wrong kind of plants. It's an easy process. You actually don't even have to call. You can go online. You don't have to talk to a person. Everything's scheduled through email. It's a really easy process. I think it took about 2 weeks from when I first put in the request to when everybody came out and flagged and marked everything in my yard. Turns out I have nothing scary in my backyard. So I was very excited about that. So now's where we get to the fun part. This is actually my research table at the time I was working at my front yard. And yes, Trader Joe's chocolate covered pretzels help. So this is the fun part. Well, I thought it was the fun part. So you may ask, why take the time to research, right? You just want to get to it. But researching increases your odds of success. And in the long run, it'll save you time, money, and frustration because you're selecting plants for your specific site needs. So how do you figure out your specific site needs? So start with a yard evaluation. You need to know about how many hours of sun your yard gets per day. Note any shady spots. Do you know your soil type? Knowing what you have or will have after sheet mulching will help you match the plant's root needs with your soil. For instance, clay drains slow and can become waterlogged, and sandy soil drains quickly but won't retain water for very long. So also, as you're going through your yard, note any problem areas on your plan. So I had areas that would flood in the winter. And that narrow planting area between my house and the walkway to the front door that I mentioned earlier is very shallow due to the foundation and extremely hot from the radiated heat of both the south-facing house and existing cement sidewalk. So special need areas like that are microclimates. Microclimates are variations in temperature and exposure in your yard. Most landscapes and gardens have microclimates, whether intended or not. So hardscapes like blacktop and concrete, south-facing walls, even a window can radiate or reflect heat, making an area warmer. So boulders can do double duty, both radiating heat and creating shady spots. In winter, cold spots are caused by small hills and valleys. The cold air flows down into low spots and creates pools of cold air, while high spots may save an area from frost. So for those of you interested specifically in succulents, you may be able to use microclimates to your advantage. So for me, over here, that means creating little pockets in my yard where a zone 10 echeveria can survive, even though it's not recommended for my 9B zone. And last, look for opportunities to frame a view. And if you wanted to know, this is an Echeveria pultonis. So when you're researching plants, first, we're in area 9B. That has to do with our hardiness zone or the freeze temperatures. But it's 9B from American Canyon to England. So we all know, living here, that we don't have the same climate or temperatures really between the two of us. We're cooler, they're hotter, they get colder than us. So you need to know your specific site needs. So know the water needs of the plants, group plants according to their water needs. So you don't want a thirsty hydrangea next to a succulent, right? It'll rot your succulent and kill it. So use this grouping to plan your plant and irrigation layout called hydrozones. So I can't stress Number 3, size and width and height of that plant. How big will it get at maturity? Those little quarts or gallons that you get are so tiny, but it doesn't take long before they're growing large. So provide specific space for plants and allow them to grow into their natural shape, which will minimize pruning. So work with nature, not against it. Also know, does the plant have a specific purpose? Like for me, does it attract hummingbirds? Or maybe you're looking for something deer resistant. And then plant color and texture, know what you have, play with it. So on the left is just an example of playing with color and texture in my garden, of the little spiky cotyledon long fingers and the pokey looking little aloe humilis and the big wide leaves and the different colors of the aeonium. So also consider flower color, maybe flower type. So it's really good to have different types of flowers, shapes, because different pollinators like different things. So I'm working on diversifying my flower shapes in my gardens. Also consider scent. There are some sages that bloom that are very fragrant. Some people hate the smell and other people love the smell. So and also consider the season of bloom. You'd like to have, to support your pollinators, something blooming all year round. And maybe consider even the seeds to feed wildlife. And then also consider dormancy. You don't want to put a plant that goes dormancy and looks terrible for half the year at the front of your planting bed. So hide it behind something else where it's safe to go dormant like it should. So now you have this, you're making an informed decision. You're picking the right plants for the right place. And there are already links to several websites in the chat, and they're free resources for both inspiration and plant education. And I'm going to share a few with you right now. So the Napa watersavingplants.com shows actual Napa Valley gardens. You can look at plants, you can learn about them, you can favorite them, you can add them to a list to do either more research or a purchasing list. There is the Calscape website. They recently redid it and it's just gorgeous. Curious about California native plants? This is the place to go. So you can find educational articles, inspirational garden pictures even, and you can search the site by a myriad of things. So nursery availability, plant type, sun exposure, water needs, special uses, soil drainage, attracts wildlife, plant size, and on there's like 10 more. So it's a great site to check out. And they even have some plans to kind of get you started. And then there is this one. It isn't as pretty as the rest, but it has excellent information in it. So this is the water use classification of landscape species that we all refer to as WUCALs. It's a database that lists plants for your region based on plant water needs. So I added in American Canyon, it's region 1. All of Napa is region 1. When you enter that in, you'll see there are, you can select by the water use, or if you go down here to the very bottom left, and there's more things, I didn't have room to include them all. But the very first thing on that list is the Arboretum All-Stars. And if you don't know where to start at all, I highly suggest you start with the All-Stars. So it's a list that is created by the University of California horticultural staff. And because they've worked with many species of plants over many years, they've gained unique insights into which plants work really well in California, even under difficult conditions. So these plants are tested both in the Arboretum as well as field trials throughout the state. The Arboretum All-Stars are 100 easy to go plants that still look good with less water. And it also, the webpage includes 5 planting plans, so you can kind of get a little idea. So what do you do with all your new site and plant knowledge? I had to get it all on paper. So I made my lot plan to scale. I used my plan of my front lawn area and tracing paper. I traced over the area that I wanted to change. I added the measurements, marked out existing plants and trees I was keeping, added all my special site conditions that I discovered, like those hot spots or shady spots. Then I just taped another sheet of paper over that one to doodle on, and I played around with garden layout ideas and plant placement. And you could just remove and add that top layer as needed. So I even, because I wanted to get my family involved, I went so far as to create circles or blobs to represent my plants. So I found creating little scale size versions of my plants helpful. It was really easy to move them around in my plan and have my family members share their ideas as well, because they thought of things I didn't think of. So it was really nice. So when I thought I had a good plan, I took a picture so I could remember the placement and then moved on. And yet here and you wonder, well, what is it going to look like in 3D? Because it can be really difficult to imagine your garden space in 3 dimensions. So if you struggle with that, like I do, go outside and stage your garden plan using items that are about the same size as your proposed plants. So you lay them out. We had a friend who had landscaping paint left over from a plumbing job that he did. So gave that to the kids. They had a grand time and they came up with all kinds of ideas. Um, yard waste bin helped us out a lot, standing in for some of our bigger plants and gave us a really good idea, because you can stage all these things and then you can walk around it to get a really good feel for your design. And then you can adjust your paper plan to match your real world experiment, or if you decided to skip the paper plan, just take some photos so you have a reminder of where you put things. So irrigation time. Now that you have your plant list and your plan, it's time to evaluate your irrigation. So this part of the process was the most daunting part for me, because there's so many options. And hold on, upside down. Since everyone's situation is unique, I couldn't find any specifics to guide me. So do you already have in-ground irrigation like I did? You can easily convert your sprayers to drip with a retrofit kit. I never knew anything existed. It looks just like a sprinkler head. It screws on where you had a sprinkler and you attach a drip line to it. So we chose subterranean drip, which is a 1/2-inch drip line tube that can be used above or below ground. And we chose to bury it to reduce evaporation, and also to make sure that our succulents weren't getting wet. Any spray or anything like that lands on your succulents can cause problems. The whole line will drip only when properly pressurized, so that assures that there's even watering occurring at each drip hole, unlike the black line where you add your own holes and emitters and possibly 1/4-inch tubing. The emitters at the end of the line lose pressure and may not drip at all. So if you don't already have water in place, that's something you're going to need to solve. We have a hose bib splitter like this in the back where we don't have any irrigation. We have that one hose bib in the entire backyard, but it does a pretty good job. We have manual timers and programmable timers, because you will forget. You will forget you turn the water on. So having a timer is so helpful. And then you just connect your drip line or soaker hose to that. So if you already have in-ground sprinklers, like I was saying, this is how it's a lot easier than I thought. It's how to prepare your yard for sheet mulching. So you need to get down to your PVC pipe where the sprinkler heads connect. And you got to dig down to, well, we had to dig down to that. And I would say be very careful, because it's really easy to break a PVC line. I may have firsthand knowledge of that. So you might need to wet the soil, right, to make your digging easier. And you just really need to be able to access those sprinkler heads where they screw into the PVC line. So you unscrew the sprinklers you won't be needing, you screw on little PVC caps or the retrofit kit, and use Teflon tape in the threads. And you may need to raise the height of the sprinkler heads, and then test the system. Ever wonder what a dirt geyser looks like? I don't have to wonder because I saw it firsthand. We missed a sprinkler head right in the middle of the yard. And once you sheet mulch, oh, it was so hard to get down to that PVC line and cap that head. It was a mess. And it actually killed a couple of my plants. So we converted the 3 sprinkler heads at the top of our slope with our retrofit kits and capped the rest, except for that one that is now capped. So I've been talking a lot about sheet mulching. What is sheet mulching? It's a method of removing lawn or weeds. Cardboard is used to create a light blocking layer that will smother the lawn and weeds. By denying weeds and lawn light, photosynthesis can't happen and plants die. So using organic matter in the form of organic compost to feed microorganisms in your soil to grow beneficial bacteria and earthworms, it helps feed your soil and disposes of the lawn. So it's good for large or small areas. And you may have wondered, well, do I have to dig out your lawn? Good news, probably not. So there may be instances where you do need or want to dig. So I had problems I needed to solve. My grass was way higher than my concrete. If I attempted to sheet mulch over the top, the grass, weeds, really just weeds, would still be exposed to light around the edges underneath the cardboard, and the compost around the edges would just slide right off. So my yard's really sloped as well, and I didn't want the compost on the sidewalk. And I needed a barrier to my neighborhood lawn squatter. So this problem was solved by a chance discovery on Nextdoor. A neighbor was removing their retaining block and giving it away for free. So we use these to edge the area at the bottom of the slope along the sidewalk and a little bit up the driveway. And we wanted to be sure they weren't going to move. So we dug out as we dug out the sprinkler heads, we just dug a little border along our driveway and the sidewalk that allowed us to fit the bottom of the blocks lower than the concrete. And now they're not going anywhere. And when I dug it out, I just chucked what I dug out like back onto the lawn because we were going to cover it up anyway. So sheet mulching steps. Prepare the site, you lay the cardboard, you cover with compost, you get planting, put those irrigation lines, mulch, huzzah, you are done. So step 1, oh yeah, and I want to tell you that I forgot to take pictures of this process. So I borrowed these lovely photos from a fellow master gardener who removed the lawn in her backyard via sheet mulching. And you can see her lawn is up against planting beds, so she didn't have to worry about whether the cardboard would move or the compost would slide off. So cut the lawn short, leave the cuttings on the lawn, water the area to be sheet mulched. And step 2, lay your cardboard. You gather the cardboard, you lay it flat, overlapping 6 to 8 inches, wet the cardboard to help keep it in place and to form around obstacles. And then if you're working around existing plants and trees, don't cover their bases because it can lead to rot. Step 3, then you cover it with compost. So my yard is on the right side. We covered with compost. You can see a little bit of the cardboard peeking out. Spread at least 2 inches of compost over the entire surface. I used well over 6 inches for my project because I wanted to just plant right into the compost because my ground is a brick. So once you put your compost out, water lightly. So we added a lot of elevation to our yard. And because I knew I was planting succulents, I needed a special well-draining soil because compost is too rich for your succulents. And I just dumped it over the compost. And then if you're not me, you just step 4 through 6, you cover it with mulch. You can cut holes in the cardboard or you can plant on top if your compost is deep enough. Then you add your drip lines and then add mulch on top. So I didn't do it like this because I didn't have this fancy guide to how to do this. So first, master gardeners get a lot of questions about mulch. So what is mulch? It's just material placed on top of soil to cover and protect it. So there's 3 distinct groups of mulch materials. There's organic, inorganic, and synthetic. And only the organic mulches made from something that was once alive, like bark, wood chips, or leaves, break down and help improve soil structure and fertility. So mulching kind of mimics the natural environment where leaves and branches will blanket the soil surface, replenishing nutrients as they decompose and creating an ideal environment for your root growth. So there's so many benefits of mulching. In a succulent garden, the rock mulches, which would be in the inorganic category, help protect your plants from rot by mimicking their natural environment. So you can use bark with succulents, but you need to be very vigilant about checking for mollusks. Slugs and snails really like hiding in bark. And be sure it isn't touching your plants and impeding air circulation, which for us was another good reason to use subterranean drip with the succulents. The bark stays dry in the summer. And I promised you epic fails. Mistakes were made. Can you spot them? So on the left, we piled the compost up too high right here around the base of our tree. If you can't see the flare at the base of the trunk, you need to pull the compost away because it can lead to crown rot. And then on the right-hand side, because we had other materials mixed into the compost for the succulent specific soil, you can really see how much compost blew away over the previous 2 months. So we didn't mulch over our compost, and the wind over winter just took it away. So if we planted right after laying out our compost, run our irrigation, and then mulched, we wouldn't have had that problem. So before I planted my first plant, I created mounds on both the succulent side. So I have one side that's mostly succulents and one side that's mostly salvias. I knew from my research that I enjoyed landscapes that mimic nature with elevation changes and rocks and boulders incorporated into the design. So it adds interest and movement to the planting area and allows me to create microclimates where I can sneak in a few succulents that otherwise wouldn't survive the winter outside. And for my steep yard, it also gives water a chance to slow down and seep into the ground. It also added a considerable amount of surface area for me to plant. So yay, more plants. So once I mounded my soil, I placed my foundation pieces, the boulders, driftwood up here, and my bigger plants. And then finally, I added in the rest of the plants. So the smaller plants around. So a tip to save yourself some extra work, keep the plants in pots and put them out according to your plan. And by leaving the plants in their pots at first, you can move them around until you're satisfied with their placement and then plant them in the ground. So this would have been the perfect time to add irrigation, but I didn't yet know what I was going to use. So that came later in my project, which is also why I still had not added mulch. I know, I lost a lot more soil too. So laying out the subterranean drip was actually kind of fun. It was a lot easier than I thought. It was kind of like playing with Tinker Toys as a kid. So, yeah, and imagine how much easier it would have been when my plants were small. So since all the succulent hydrozones were the same, I just added 2 different lengths to the lower part and the higher part of the yard. And for me, shoving the tubing over the barred connectors was the hardest part for me. So I needed to call in backup. I called in my hubby and he muscled them in for me. And then I buried the lines and secured them with drip line staples. You definitely want to use drip line staples, not landscaping fabric staples. And you want to use them because as the water shuts on and off, they will work their way to the surface. So it's important to have them staked in the ground. If I were adding this drip line to maybe larger perennials or a tree with like big spaces between the plants, I would use the black tubing with no emitters to get the water to the plants and then connect the subterranean drip, making a ring around the plant at the outermost point of the foliage, which we call the drip line. And then as those plants grow though, you need to expand or add new rings to the irrigation. And so then we mulched, right? No, we didn't. No, because I added my drip line so long after planting the plants. I needed to wait to finish the drip line process on the lower tier, which is what I showed you on the right. It was August and it was far too hot to stress out my succulents by moving them. So I actually did dig them out later and replant everything and then mulched. No, we didn't. We still didn't mulch even after that. So that's my story. This is my before and after. So my new garden has been in for just 3.5 years, and I captured the after just early September as I made this presentation. So I didn't do any cleanup, I promise. It's just how it looks. And some whoops may call it like messy, but I love it. So for me, there's color year round, even without flowers. But the succulents, really, there's a lot more blooms than you think. And so many succulents bloom at different times of year. So I have something blooming almost year round. It's full of a variety of pollinators. And as you know, this summer has been particularly hot. And I have been extra busy and I have neglected my garden thoroughly. So from late May until now, I think I've worked maybe 4 days, a few hours in my front garden to cut down the Lebanonist that's a self-seeding annual that I just love. And I allow it to run amok every spring. And I think I have watered maybe 5 times all summer. Like, honestly, does it look its best? No, would have been way happier with more water, but it's not dead. So it'll come back when the rains come. Please come. So because those little guys just retain extra moisture in their leaves and stems to sustain themselves until the next time they receive water, they tolerate my neglect. So yay, succulents. And lucky for me, my husband, he keeps a close eye on the salvia side of the garden and he runs the drip line about once every 2 weeks. And then here's my yard 6 months after planting it. And then 1 year after planting it, I mean, things are really just growing in. And 2 years after, and 3 years, that's this year. So I hope you found something useful. I hope there is a little inspiration to get your wheels turning, maybe. Gave you a little courage to just get going, maybe spark some enthusiasm to get that project started. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. That was really an excellent presentation. And this presentation can be found on our website. You know our website. And it'll be on there in about a week or so. If you go up to the top line here, which says public events, and you scroll down to past programs and events, it'll bring up this program and all the other programs that we have offered. So it's a great resource for you. Next, please.
For sure. And I think it's just questions.
Questions.
Any
If
question?
anyone has a question, please type it into the chat.
I don't see any questions in the chat. So if somebody has some questions, please enter them now, or you can turn off your mute and ask the question if you like.
Hi, I have a question.
All right.
I have done something similar, only I wasn't clever enough to have put in irrigation. So I learned a lot. It's in my front yard. And one thing that happened is I had a couple of different kinds of, I think they were agaves or something like that. And a couple of them died in the rain. And I wondered if you had any tips, because when we had such a heavy downpour last winter, I had one, I've forgotten what it's called, but it's like Queen Victoria something or other. And it's
Queen Victoria Reginae. That's a pretty one.
Oh, and it died. I was so heartbroken. That was my big purchase. I was looking forward to nursing that one along, and it just couldn't take the rain. Do you have any tips for how to deal with the varying needs of different kinds of plants that normally work really well together, but when we have these extreme weather situations, you can have, problems? and I just didn't really know what to do.
So for me, I made my own soil. So I mixed soil and I used the raised mounds. So mounding can help your drainage quite a bit and keep things from pooling. Being sure you don't have a lot of organic matter in the soil with your plants, and also make sure there's plenty of room between your plants for them to dry up. So I too lost an agave this year to rot, and it just, the plants were so overcrowded. I did not heed my own, warning of making sure, because you want them to like look good right at the beginning. So you smush them in, right?
Yeah.
So they were just too close together. There wasn't good air circulation, and the slugs and snails got to them, and they eat the roots and they eat the bottom, and it just caused the whole thing. It molded, it rotted, it smelled awful. And so you'll know when you pull a plant out of the ground just by smelling it that it's rot.
Yeah.
So use those mounds. Make sure you, for the succulents, that you amend them with, I use pumice and sharps. So you can use builder grade sand, or I use like paver set. It's some places, some rock yards call it quarter to dust or quarter by dust. I did half compost, a quarter of the quarter by dust, and a quarter of the pumice, and it has really worked great. Aside from that one area, and I know, like I just crowded them too close together, and they got too wet. There were leaves in there I didn't clean out. So
yeah, I have an oak tree above it too, so it dumps everything down. That's no fun. That's really important. Thank you so much for the information. I think the soil is the key for me. I think I had too much. I had mixed my native soil, which unfortunately is a heavy clay, with a whole bunch of compost and grit, but I probably should have left the clay out altogether.
I have a comment on the Queen Victoria Regina, because I have two prize succulents. One is called a brain cactus, and the other one is my Queen Victoria. And neither of them like a lot of rain. And I created little covers for them for the winter. I just turned over like one of those hanging pots kind of thing. I emptied it out and just turned it over upside down and covered it with plastic.
Okay.
So it
make it
allowed
a little umbrella.
Like a little umbrella, and they did fine. I've got a lot of clay soil too, but I did protect those two specimen plants through the rains, and they turned out fine.
That's a great idea. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for answering that.
There's some other questions in the chat. Let's see. How often do you need to, oh, there was one up above that. How much sun do the succulents get, Tanya, in your yard?
Oh, my succulents are south facing. So they get, almost all of them get sun all day. So I have aeoniums. So I don't know if you are familiar with aeoniums, but they are a summer dormant plant. So they go to sleep in the summer when it gets hot. And I have those underneath my tree, which you saw grew considerably in those 30 years because they were so happy with not getting water. But I keep those that in the shade, and it kind of fakes them out a little bit, and they'll stay open during the summer a little bit more. But for the most part, they get a lot of sun. Now I have some that they don't like it. So I create the microclimates for them. I'll put a boulder or a larger plant that will shade them and give them some protection during the hottest part of the day.
Thank you.
You just need to do the research and know which plants can handle more. I mean, we're finding that these 100-degree days, none of them like it. None of them.
Exactly.
They're all getting fried a little bit on the tips.
And yeah, that's one of the things I think when you're just learning about succulents is to learn about their dormancy periods as well.
And because your first inclination to, when you see the aeonium leaves all crispy, it's like, oh, this poor thing needs more water. But when it's dormant, it's not taking up water. So you're adding more water, it's just going to cause your plant to rot. So knowing those dormancy periods is important. Yeah.
Another question is, how often do you need to replant succulents? Mine get very leggy after a few years.
Oh, yeah, of course it depends, right? That's the
Mhm.
master gardener favorite answer. It depends, because
Depends.
it does. It depends on what the succulent is and what the look you're looking for. I love an excuse to putter around in my succulent garden. And in fact, I'm looking to kind of rearrange things again this fall, and like enough with the heat wave already. So yeah, it just depends on the succulent and how much water it got, how big it gets, and whether you like how big it gets.
And if it's getting leggy, maybe it's not getting enough sun.
Some of them, the cotyledons, I would say, or the graptopetalums or the paraguinaceae, those guys just get leggy. And when you're tired of the leggy look, literally behead them, cut back the legginess, and just stuff the little heads back amongst. I keep the roots because a lot of those will rebloom or regrow from the bottom and kind of fill in those kind of naked spots once they get leggy. Senecio is another one. So when you don't like it, cut it back, but don't do it in the summer, in the hottest part of the summer. If you don't like being outside, they are definitely not going to like being beheaded, right? Nobody likes that on a hot day.
In the Deborah Baldwin book, they show how to behead a succulent too. That's one of the things they cover.
Literally just what looks good, you cut it off and you stick it. You can either stick it right back in your ground, or you can wait a little while, let it callus. If you put it right back in the ground, just don't water it. It has no roots to take up water, so there's no point in watering it. That makes sense.
And here's another question about frost. What about frost? Do they need protection?
Depends on your succulent. So that's where your research is going to come in very handy. There are sempervivums that don't mind the frost. In fact, they'll live under the snow all winter long. But like for instance, on this picture, the afterglow, that does not like frost. So I use Christmas lights, incandescent, like the old ones, and I kind of wind the Christmas lights through areas that I want to keep a little bit warmer. I'm also an American Canyon, so we're on the water side. We don't get nearly as much frost as parts of Napa does. So know your plants. You can cover them, but that gets old after the first 2 years. I just decided if it doesn't survive, I'll pick something else or let something else fill in. So just do your plant research and find out how cold they can get.
It is important to know where in the valley, again, right plant, right place. So. When moving succulents around, how do you avoid your irrigation?
My soil is really loose, so it's easy for me, and I basically remember where I put it. So I haven't stabbed it. I don't. Oh well, I will have a hard time probably. I have an agave I need to move, and it's going to be in there, and it's going to be in there amongst the in the irrigation. I guess the best thing is, you can mark it a little bit, maybe with something inconspicuous, or take pictures. So when you come, you can look like, okay, here's where they are. I can't see them anymore because my plants have grown over them, but here's where they are, and just feel around and try not to hit them. And if you do hit them, be sure that you or someone close by, perhaps your husband, that's who I always call, honey, I need you to fix the drip line. So it happens. It's not too bad to fix it.
And I think Linda Henderson had raised her hand.
Yeah, thanks. I have a situation where my drip lines, I have drip lines that they're under the soil. They're buried under about, maybe 3 inches of soil. And so if I were doing dry mulching, should I just leave them there and leave that soil there and put the cardboard over everything? Or do I need to remove the soil that's already there? And they were buried because they're sprayers and they were spraying all over this patio. And so I wanted the drip lines not to be spraying all over the chairs and everything. So they put them underground, and they have lots of little holes. It's not just strategic holes for individual plants. There are lots of holes along these drip lines. Then there's dirt on top of them. So the plants will grow down into the dirt and find the drip line.
I guess it depends. Sorry, that is always the answer. If you're sheet mulching over, like sheet mulching won't hurt it, and eventually the cardboard just disappears. It only took 6 months and my cardboard was gone. Any signs of the cardboard was gone. So you can dig down to the drip lines.
Can I leave the soil that's there and then put the cardboard and then put the compost on top of it? Or do I need to dig out the soil that's on top of the drip lines?
You shouldn't have to.
I don't think you would have to take it
No.
out. It just, your plant's not going to be able to access that water with the cardboard there until it can work through it, but it'll definitely energize your little microbes to eat the cardboard faster. But I don't think you'd have to take it out, but it's hard to say without seeing it exactly, right?
Like, should I turn the drip line off? I mean, if I put it in for the winter, so like if I put the sheet mulch in the fall and then let us do its thing over the winter, it should be fine in the spring, right?
It should be fine.
Okay.
I would think so. I mean,
Thanks.
like I said, without having seen it,
Yeah.
it seems like it should be
Mm.
fine.
Okay.
And then we have one more question. It's 8 o'clock and we have to let our library folks go. I have some succulents in pots and they have been there for years. What is the best approach to keeping the soil fertile enough without doing it, without overdoing it?
Succulents in pots, I always find that after a couple, like a year or so, that the soil becomes all roots and there's nothing left. So often you could tip your pot, tug on your plants, and like the whole thing comes out as one. So it depends on what succulents you have in there. Often like the soil has shrunk also because it's breaking down. You can take it out and add new fresh potting soil to it and then break up your plants and put them back in. It just depends on if you like the look of them, leave them. If they're happy.
And some of them like a tight pot.
Yeah.
I have a fair amount of succulents in containers and pots as well. And I've not during their dormancy period, but during their non-dormancy periods, I fertilize only about once a year.
And they like, I mean, most of them actually appreciate it. So, yeah.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you, Tanya. It was very
Thank
good.
you.
And thank you everybody for coming. And we hope to see you next month, November 7th. And we'll be talking about rain capture, capturing water to help the earth and your garden. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That was a
Thank
wonderful
you.
program, Tanya. Really
Thank
great.
you.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun to hear you talk about your subject that you know so well.
Well, I lived it. So, and I made some dumb mistakes, but you don't know until you know,
That's right.
You're brave. You're brave.
I wanted to do it. It's like, I'm sick of this lawn. It's so ugly. We had been encroaching into the lawn space, a little bit. And it's like, let's just take it out. So I was researching sheet mulching, on my own and trying to figure out how to do it and, gathering the boxes and all of that. So it worked great. I mean, I don't have any weeds coming up at all. I have blown in weeds that come up on top, but I don't have any coming through at all.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe knock on wood, I'll go out there and I'll just find a whole bunch, but it worked really well.
So everyone's saying great program and thank you.
Thank you.
And we thank you too, Tanya.
Yeah.
Now you can go have a relaxing evening.
Go to bed. It's past my bedtime. It's 8:04.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night and thank you.